My inner voice has gotten completely out of control. It's ruined a lot of things. My inner voice killed me today. I watched my account go down and inside I'm thinking it's going to work, but at the end, time was against me and so was my inner voice, who was like the trading devil. Negative self-talk has destroyed me and my trading account. It's comforting knowing I'm not crazy and the only one going through this. I read all your comments on the last video and one thing is absolutely clear. Negative self-talk is something people are really struggling with, particularly how it affects our trading performance. If you haven't seen that last video, make sure you watch that one first because it explains all the research behind why negative self-talk happens and exactly how it's affecting your trading. I don't want to waste any time in this video, so I want to get straight onto the topic of how to control this self-talk, to stop it sabotaging our trading and to let it become more of an ally than an enemy. So just like usual, the sources are down in the description box if you want to explore further. Now, there are many approaches that we can take, so I'm going to walk you through the most useful ones, at least the ones that I think are most useful, and this will then be like a toolbox that you can dive into when you need it. However, most of these things will be most effective if you use them consistently over time. So just like how you create a development plan for your trading or how you might follow a workout plan at the gym, you're going to need to commit to following through on the things that we discuss all the time to slowly regain control over that negative self-talk until eventually you win the battle. Remember in the last video how we discussed that your mind is like a lens and your negative self-talk will cause it to narrowly zoom in on a problem. Not only does this cause you to lose sight of the bigger picture, but it also hogs your neural resources, which limits what's available for your important executive functions. Now, research has shown that we are able to zoom out by using distancing techniques, which reduces the fight or flight response and cuts down the emotional activity in our brains. So studies have found that people using immersive language get caught in their emotions and focus on the pain, whereas people using distancing language achieve clearer and more complex thinking as they can view events from the perspective of a third party or something like that. So you need to switch from immersive to distancing language when you're in those difficult moments. Now, when you're in a moment that you enjoy, like a positive moment, you want to be in immersive language because you want to actually experience that good moment. But when it's the difficult moments, we need to be using distancing language. Now, one way to do this is to adopt a second or third person point of view. So rather than referring to things like I, me, or my, you can say things like you, or he, she. This is distancing language. When people use more immersive language, otherwise known as I talk, they've been found to experience more negative emotions, including on social media, where there was a link between people using more I talk and higher levels of depression. On the other hand, distanced self-talk leads to less negative emotion, less nervousness, and better performance in potentially anxiety-inducing situations. It's basically like a psychological hack that allows us to gain perspective. But there's a way that we can actually go a step further with this distancing language, beyond just second and third person words like they, he, and she. Now, this one may feel a little bit strange to do, but it's been shown through EEG scans to reduce emotional activity in your brain after just 1 second. The technique is that you should use your own name. For example, if I see a big market move happening and I can feel a sense of FOMO building in me, I can get the right perspective of that emotional response and understand what I should do by asking myself, why is Nicholas feeling a sense of urgency? Rather than asking, why am I feeling a sense of urgency? By doing this, I'm zooming out from the situation, reducing the emotional activity in my brain, and gaining enough distance to understand the situation and make a more rational decision. It's switching my perspective to one that's more helpful, and the added bonus is that it doesn't actually take any additional mental bandwidth to do this. Unlike the negative inner talk, which takes away from our executive functions, as we discussed in the last video, using this technique won't do that. But if you find that a bit too strange, referring to yourself by your own name, You can take an alternative approach, which is to imagine that you're advising a friend in that situation rather than thinking about what you should do yourself. It's been found that we're much wiser and less irrational when advising someone else rather than when we're making decisions for ourselves. This is something known as Solomon's paradox. So in one study, people were asked about a dilemma involving a cheating partner, and when they were asked what their friend should do about it if their partner cheated on them, they were much more rational and willing to compromise. But in the same situation, when it was themselves that were involved, they were more irrational and took a completely different approach. So the difference was in their emotional distance in the two situations. Another study asked people what medical treatment to choose when they have a life-threatening disease. So with the treatment, there was a chance of death, but the chance of death, the probability of that happening, was lower than if they just remain with the disease itself. Okay, so they have the option of treatment or staying with the disease. The treatment does have a chance of death, but is lower than the disease, the chance of death there. So when advising a friend, people were rational and suggested that the treatment was the right option to take. Whereas when they were choosing for themselves, they chose the irrational option and they chose not to undergo the treatment more often. So although these situations aren't specifically related to trading, they do show how immersing or distancing can change our decisions, even when we're able to compare probabilities and see which choice is most rational. So when we find ourselves in situations where our inner talk is taking over, we're getting a bit emotional and it's leading us to potentially make irrational decisions with our trading, we can take a step back by considering how we would advise someone else in that situation and what we think they should do. You know, it's funny, we see this one playing out all the time in real life in our community. So we'll have members who will give great advice to other members, but then they'll fall for bad decisions with their own trading, like increasing risk, moving stop losses, or panic closing their trades, things that they would advise people against doing, yet they do it on their own trading. And by the way, learning to use these distancing techniques isn't just going to help you with your trading, but it's going to help you with all aspects of your life. For example, it was found that when partners are arguing, and of course some argue more than others, those that use immersive language would argue calmly with their partner when their partner was arguing calmly, but would react angrily at the slightest hint of negative emotions from their partner. Whereas those that use distancing language could keep calm regardless of what their partner did, and therefore solve the problem more rationally and ease the conflict. So, better trading and fewer arguments at home, I think that's a win-win. This next technique ties in really well with trading because everyone knows how important journaling is for improving your trading. It gives you the opportunity to optimize your system. It allows you to self-reflect and self-correct, which are two essential components for accelerated learning. And it's just generally a good way to make sure you're staying accountable. So if you're already doing that, you may as well stack on something else to that process that will help you to reduce your negative self-talk. One study found that asking people to write about their negative experiences for 15 to 20 minutes and creating a narrative about what happened led them to feeling much better about the situation and reducing that negative self-talk. You have to do it as if you're a narrator, like narrating about the experiences as if it's a story and you're the main character. Okay, so you're almost like a third person. This once again helps create more of a distancing approach, which will give you the chance to get the right perspective and understand why you're feeling or acting the way that you are. This will make it much easier to solve the issue and to progress beyond it. This next one is a short one, but very important. It's another approach to distancing, but as the name suggests, temporal distancing, this time, rather than distancing by looking at our situation as an outsider, we're going to look at it as if it's at a different point in time. So studies have shown that this so-called mental time travel is an effective way of putting difficult experiences into perspective. Rather than thinking about how you feel about something now or immediately after it's done, you can instead think about how you'll feel about it 10 years from now, or at some other point in time in the sort of long-term future. This will help you to see that experiences are temporary and they won't last forever. This will give you more hope and makes it much easier to deal with a situation in the right way. It reduces that negative inner voice, and it also means you can see how you may end up regretting particular decisions in the future as well. If you're making a decision that you know is not right for your trading, if you think about how you'll feel about it in 10 years, then you're not going to care about satisfying that short-term need. You're going to be thinking about the expense it will have on your long-term progress. And there's another technique as well that's quite similar, which is to broaden your perspective by thinking about how your current problem compares to previous experiences that you've managed to get through in the past, or things that other people, such as your ancestors or people you admire, what they went through, and seeing how this compares to that. You could even think about how those people may have dealt with your current situation, and therefore it's sort of like having a board of advisors inside your mind. Alright, now we're going to move on to the things that are not so much about trying to gain distance, but more about seeing our current situation in the right way. You see, many negative things that we encounter aren't actually that negative. It's just the way that we're looking at them. Other people could be in the exact same situation as us and feel the complete opposite way about it. You see, when we encounter potentially stressful situations, we assess that stressful situation by essentially asking ourselves two questions. What is required of me, and do I have the resources to cope with that? If we conclude that we do have what's needed, we'll see the situation as a challenge. If we think that we don't, we'll see it as a threat. Unfortunately though, there's a physiological difference that takes place depending on whether it's a challenge or a threat to us. Both have similarities, for example, speeding up our heart rate, but if we see it as a threat, our vasculature will constrict and give less room for blood to flow. If we see it as a challenge, the vasculature relaxes. I'm sure you can guess which one leads to better performance, right? Now, this actually relates to what we've already been talking about, because studies have found that when we see a stressful event as a threat, we'll use more immersive self-talk, and when it's a challenge, we'll use more distant self-talk. So the way we talk about the situation will change our inner voice and can lead to a more constructive framing of the situation. One way to reframe the situation as a challenge instead of a threat is to remind yourself of times that you overcame similar problems in an appropriate way. This will help you to reduce the negative self-talk that you're experiencing and get better perspective over the situation. However, the changes in your body can also reinforce the negative self-talk as well. For example, if you're feeling nervous and you start noticing your heart rate increasing and your palms getting sweaty, that could compound the issue and lead to your inner voice getting even worse. So instead, we need to reinterpret these bodily responses to help reduce the negative self-talk. For example, in the last video, I explained how stress is actually a good thing, since it's an adaptive response that improves our performance. So when our breathing quickens, our heartbeat races, we need to remind ourselves that it isn't necessarily a feeling that we have to avoid. It's not there to sabotage us, but it could actually help us to respond to the situation and perform even better. So by looking at it this way, reinterpreting those body signs, reframing the situation, we can limit the negative self-talk and have a much better chance of succeeding. A psychologist called Bernard Ramey discovered that when people go through negative experiences, they feel the need to talk to others about it. Unless they had some sort of shame about the situation or they'd gone through some sort of trauma that they wanted to avoid dwelling on, they'd talk to people about that situation. And it was found that the more intense the emotion, the stronger the need to talk about it. And people would return to talking about what happened multiple times, sometimes even throughout their entire life. This is because we seek the empathy of other people. It's an evolution that helps keep our species alive, as you have a much better chance of overcoming a threat if there's more than one of you dealing with it. Now, if you have people around you that care about you, I'm sure they'll often ask you to talk about your problems and to share your feelings and so on. But unfortunately, research has shown that when people share thoughts or feelings after a traumatic experience, they cope worse than those people who don't share it. You see, when we're emotional, most people close to us will respond in a way that prioritizes our emotional needs instead of our cognitive needs. They see our pain and they want to give us love and validation, but this means that without meaning to, they're actually encouraging our negative emotions. It's almost as if there are now two people or more going through your negative self-talk, but out loud. You're co-ruminating. And also, negative experiences can activate other negative thoughts, so you may end up experiencing a domino effect that just ends up amplifying the negative emotions. So instead, you need to talk to people who don't just satisfy your emotional needs and echo your thoughts, but will offer cognitive support instead and help you to gain perspective to be able to address the situation correctly. So if you're having a difficult time with your trading, you need to choose really wisely who you talk to about it. You need to choose someone who has the ability to help you see the bigger picture and not someone, for example, who knows very little about what you're doing. Like most people around us, they don't really understand trading that much. And so all they're going to want to do is to support you emotionally. Instead, seek out the right people if you want to talk about it. The financial markets can really amplify the negative parts of us sometimes. Now, part of this is down to the risk that's involved in trading, the ups and downs of making and losing money. And part of it is because we're dealing with uncertainty. A lack of control can lead to a spike in our negative self-talk. So it's no wonder that so many of you are experiencing more self-talk when you're trading. In fact, when people lack control, they start even seeing imaginary patterns in things, since their mind is simulating order. So this may even be why people end up irrationally believing in particular chart patterns, since their lack of control in the uncertain markets is leading their mind to simulating order for them. Now, how much we believe in our control over a situation will also influence whether we try to achieve goals and how much effort or persistence we show. If we don't feel like we have much control over the situation, we won't put in as much effort. If we feel we have a lot of control, we will. So if we increase our sense of control, we're going to reduce negative self-talk and improve our physical health and emotional well-being. However, there's not much way for us to control the markets. There's very limited control that we can have as one trader when there are so many of them moving the prices in the markets. Even as a profitable trader, you're still relying on probabilities rather than absolute certainties. So instead, we can use something known as compensatory control. This is where we create order in our physical environment to provide ourselves with the order that we need inside ourselves. So the physical environment we're in is intertwined with our minds. It activates psychological forces inside us that affects how we think or feel. And if we have order in our world, it's comforting because it's predictable and easy to deal with. So creating this sort of order will act as a buffer against the negative self-talk that's encouraged from the markets. One of the ways that we can achieve this compensatory control is by creating rituals. So for example, one ritual that you could have could be to tidy your workspace before your trading session. That means your environment that you're working in is going to be much more organized. Or you may have seen sports people having strange rituals. One that's mentioned by Ethan Kross, who's a neuroscientist and expert on mental chatter, is the tennis player Rafael Nadal. Rafael Nadal says, "What I battle hardest to do in a tennis match is to quiet the voices in my head." In an attempt to achieve this, you may have seen him doing things like placing his tournament ID card face up on his chair or arranging water bottles.
Uh-oh. See that shows Nadal knows all too well why everybody is laughing, completely obsessive about his water bottles.
He says, "It's a way of placing myself in a match, ordering my surroundings to match the order I seek in my head." The great thing about these rituals is that whether a ritual is produced organically or if you consciously create one and engage in it, it can still help you just the same. Therefore, creating rituals for specific situations can lead us to putting ourselves in the states that we want to be in and to reduce the negative internal talk that's going to happen by feeling like we don't have control. The final tool I want to share with you is something that's sort of like a mental vitamin for us. It doesn't just help reduce negative inner talk, but it's also been shown to have positive effects on our health, including our mental health. And that powerful thing is nature. As I mentioned in the last video, when we give our voluntary attention to something, it takes up a lot of neural resources and will drain very quickly. It constantly needs to be recharged. Unfortunately though, negative inner talk takes up this voluntary attention as we're focusing our attention on the object of the negativity. But nature helps us recharge our voluntary attention as it captivates our involuntary attention instead, which is more of a soft fascination and doesn't drain our neural resources in the same way. In a study, people who were exposed to nature saw a 60% increase in their ability to recover from the stress of an event. Now, part of the effectiveness of nature is down to us experiencing awe, which is an emotion that we feel when we're in the presence of something big or powerful that we can't easily explain. And this is something that we experience often when we're in nature. When we're filled with wonder, our brain responds in a similar way to when people meditate or take LSD. Not that I'm recommending doing that. So we're able to think beyond our own wants and needs and realize that we're not the center of the universe. And so because of this, our inner voice basically responds in a similar way to when we use a distancing technique, and that means we can get a better perspective of our problems. Evolutionary psychologists believe that we developed this emotion of awe to help us unite with other people in the face of something powerful, as we'd have more chance of surviving if we were together. So in addition to having more perspective of the situation, people that are awe-prone come across as more humble and have a more balanced view of their own strengths and weaknesses, which can help with making better and more rational decisions. But if you live in the middle of a city and you're surrounded by buildings and concrete and glass, then bad luck. Just kidding. Don't worry. It's been found that second-hand exposure to nature also works. So you can get similar effects by watching videos, looking at photos, listening to the sounds of nature as well. But just remember, your voluntary attention can only recharge if it's not being used. So having nature sounds on while you're trading isn't really going to be recharging anything. So let's quickly recap the tools that we went through in this video so you don't forget any of them. First of all, we had the use of distancing rather than immersing language through using second or third person terms, or you can use your own name or pretend that you're advising a friend. You can write in your journal as if you're narrating your own story and you're the main character, or you can use mental time travel to think how you'll feel about the situation at some point in the long-term future, or how it compares to previous things you or people that you admire have been through. You can reframe the situation as a challenge instead of a threat and change your language to help you do that. This will change your physiology as a result and give you a better chance of succeeding. If you're going to talk to other people about your negative situations, make sure you pick a friend who will give you cognitive support rather than just emotional support so you can get the right perspective and avoid making it worse. You can create rituals to gain compensatory control, and you can go out in nature to engage your involuntary attention and trigger feelings of awe. I mentioned a little bit earlier in the video the expert on mental chatter, Kross. He's actually put together a toolkit that has these techniques that we've gone through and more. So if you want more techniques, I'd recommend checking out his work. And I know this has been a long video, but I knew it was an important one that we cover in detail so you can make full use of these tools. But let me know in the comments if you made it this far, and maybe let me know which points you're going to be putting into practice. Maybe it's going to be all of them. And remember, some of these things will work instantly to a certain extent, but they're all going to be much more powerful if you stick with them consistently over time and get better at doing them. So let me know how you get on, as there are other techniques as well that we can use to help you overcome negative self-talk and general negativity in your mindset. So if we need to, we can cover those as well. Just let me know. Remember, you're not alone with these problems. I'm here to help you to keep growing as a trader and to deal with any obstacles that come your way. So let me know what you need in the comments. Please do hit the thumbs up button if you found this helpful, and I'll see you in the next video very, very soon. Thank you so much for watching. Take care and good luck.